They were told they were going to hell. They packed for pain, fear, hunger, and death. They expected chains, screams, interrogations, darkness. But when the train doors opened, they saw green grass, clean white buildings, and the skyline of New York City in the distance. This was not a nightmare. This was not a dream. And this was not a normal prison camp. This was the most unbelievable lager for German soldiers in history. A place where prisoners ate better than civilians, slept in clean beds, and were allowed to walk freely through New York. And almost nobody knows it existed. The year was 1944. The war was tearing Europe apart. Cities were burning. Millions were dying. And German soldiers captured overseas believed only one thing: if we are taken alive, we will suffer. Rumors traveled faster than bullets. Stories of brutal camps, torture, interrogations, starvation, beatings, cold cells, broken men. So when a transport ship crossed the Atlantic carrying captured German soldiers, fear lived in every breath they took. Some prayed, some cried, some wrote final letters they believed would never be sent. Some accepted death. They were told only one thing: you are being transferred to a special camp. No location, no details, no explanation, just silence. When the ship arrived, they were moved onto trains, windows covered, guards silent. No signs, no names, no directions. Hours passed, then days. The soldiers imagined forests, mountains, remote military zones, secret prisons. But then the train slowed down. They heard city noise, cars, voices, music, horns. And suddenly, the doors opened. Sunlight, fresh air, and something impossible. Skyscrapers. In the distance, the skyline of New York City. Some thought it was a hallucination. Some believed they were being psychologically broken. Some whispered, "This is a trick." But it wasn't. They weren't taken to the middle of nowhere. They were taken to a camp near one of the most powerful cities on Earth. And then they saw the lager. No barbed wire towers, no execution yards, no dark barracks, no chains. Instead, clean white buildings, green grass, wide paths, wooden benches, trees, windows without bars, real doors, open spaces. It looked more like a college campus than a prison. The soldiers stood frozen, confused, suspicious, silent. One of them whispered, "This is not a camp. This is a resort." Then came the first shock. They were given food, not rations, not soup water, not breadcrumbs, real meals, hot food, meat, vegetables, fresh bread, milk, coffee. Some soldiers started crying while eating, not because of pain, because of confusion, because nothing made sense anymore. That night, they were given beds, not wooden planks, not cold floors, not shared straw, real beds, mattresses, blankets, pillows, heated rooms, lights, warmth, clean air, silence. One soldier said quietly, "If this is a trap, it's the kindest trap in history." But the real shock came the next morning. An officer entered the building and said something that no prisoner expected to hear in their life. "Today, you will be allowed outside the camp." They thought it meant the yard, the fence, the inner territory. But the officer continued, "You will be allowed to walk in the city." Silence, then laughter, then disbelief, then fear, then confusion, then one question: which city? The answer? New York. Not escort marches, not chains, not armed convoys. Just groups of soldiers, walking out of the camp toward one of the biggest cities in the world. Free. No handcuffs, no blindfolds, no cages. Only one rule. You must return by evening. And that's when they realized this wasn't a normal camp. This wasn't a prison. This wasn't punishment. This was something else, something experimental, something psychological, something strategic, something terrifying in a different way, not through violence, but through kindness. Because the true question wasn't, why are conditions so good? The real question was, why would a country at war treat enemy soldiers better than its own poor citizens? They stood at the gate, not behind bars, not behind wire, not behind towers. Just a simple wooden gate, open. No chains, no dogs, no rifles pointed at their backs. Only one American officer standing calmly, holding a clipboard. He looked at them and said, "You may leave the camp. You may walk in the city. You may enter stores. You may speak to people. You may eat in restaurants. But by sunset, you return." Silence. The soldiers looked at each other. No one moved. Because fear doesn't disappear when freedom appears. Sometimes it grows. One of them whispered, "This is impossible." Another said, "They're testing us." Another, "If we run, they will kill us." But no one ran. They walked, slowly, carefully, like men stepping into another world. The road from the camp led toward the city. Cars passed, people walked, buses moved, music played from open windows, vendors shouted, children laughed. Life, normal life, New York life, and German soldiers in worn uniforms were walking through it, not hiding, not chained, not guarded, just walking. People noticed them. At first, confusion, then curiosity, then silence, then whispers, then fear. Are those German soldiers? Is this a movie? What is happening? Some civilians stopped. Some crossed the street. Some stared. Some took photos. Some children pointed. Some shop owners froze in doorways. And the soldiers felt it. That tension. That invisible wall. They were free. But not welcome. One soldier walked into a bakery. The smell of fresh bread hit him like a memory from another life. The woman behind the counter froze. Her face changed. Fear. Anger. Confusion. He slowly spoke broken English. "Bread. Please." Silence. The woman looked at his uniform, looked at his face, looked at his hands. Then she said, "Money?" He gave her coins. She gave him bread. Their hands touched, both flinched. No hatred, no violence. Just two humans who didn't understand the world anymore. Another group entered a cafe. People stopped talking. Spoons froze mid-air. Eyes followed every movement. They sat down. A waitress approached slowly. Nervous. Careful. "What do you want?" One soldier said, "Coffee." She brought it. No one spoke. But something strange happened. Nobody attacked them. Nobody called police. Nobody screamed. Life continued. They walked through streets, through parks, through markets, through neighborhoods, through places they had only seen in propaganda films. They saw American families, American soldiers, American flags, American stores, American freedom. And no one touched them. No one beat them. No one arrested them. No one tortured them. One soldier said quietly, "Back home, they told us Americans were monsters." Another answered, "Back home, they told us we would be killed if captured." But here they were, drinking coffee, eating bread, walking freely, in New York. But the fear didn't leave, because deep inside, every soldier felt the same thing. This kindness is not random. War does not create mercy. War creates strategy. And this felt like a plan. That night, they returned to the camp, not forced, not dragged, not hunted. They returned willingly, because something strange had happened. They trusted the system, and that terrified them. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The routine became normal. Morning food, clean clothes, beds, books, music, sports, walks to the city, talks with civilians, conversations. Life. Not survival. Life. Some soldiers started changing, not physically, mentally, emotionally, ideologically. They started questioning everything. If Americans are evil, why do they treat us like humans? If this is the enemy, why do they feed us? If this is propaganda, why does it feel real? Some began learning English. Some started reading American newspapers. Some listened to American radio. Some made American friends. Some even started falling in love. And that's when the lager revealed its true purpose. This was not a prison camp. This was not mercy. This was not kindness. This was not humanitarianism. This was psychological warfare. No torture, no pain, no violence, no fear. Only one weapon: reality. They were not being broken. They were being transformed. Because when you destroy a man's body, he fights back. But when you change a man's beliefs, he changes himself. American intelligence understood something powerful. You don't need to beat soldiers to defeat an army. You need to change what they believe in. These soldiers would one day return home. They would talk. They would tell stories. They would speak about American kindness, American freedom, American life, American humanity, not propaganda posters, not radio lies, not leaflets. Real experience. This lager was not designed to hold them. It was designed to send them back changed. As living messages, as walking contradictions to Nazi ideology, as proof that the enemy was not a monster. One officer said in a closed meeting, "A soldier who believes in his cause is dangerous. A soldier who doubts his cause is already defeated." And slowly, the lager did its work. Not through chains, not through fear, not through violence, but through comfort, through dignity, through normality, through humanity. But there was a problem. Not everyone accepted it. Some soldiers resisted. Some stayed loyal. Some saw this as manipulation. Some refused food. Some refused the city. Some isolated themselves. Some called others traitors. Some whispered, "This is brainwashing." And they were right. It was. But not the kind people expect. Because the most powerful brainwashing is not lies. It's truth that contradicts your worldview. And that's when tensions started growing. Conflicts inside the camp. Fights, arguments, divisions. Not between prisoners and guards, but between the prisoners themselves. Some wanted freedom. Some wanted loyalty. Some wanted America. Some wanted Germany. Some wanted peace. Some wanted war. The lager didn't divide them physically. It divided them mentally. And the biggest question became, when the war ends, who will these men be? German soldiers or something else? Because once you walk freely through New York, once you eat at American tables, once you speak with civilians, once you see the enemy as human, you can never go back to being the same person. The lager had a name, not a public one, not on maps, not in newspapers, not in records, only in documents stamped classified, only in files locked in steel cabinets, only in conversations behind closed doors. It was called the Human Reset Project. Not officially, not legally, not publicly. That was the internal name, and it changed everything. The camp was never built as a prison. It was built as a laboratory. Not for weapons, not for bombs, not for technology, for minds, for beliefs, for identity. American intelligence didn't ask, how do we break enemy soldiers? They asked, how do we rebuild them? Psychologists, sociologists, behavioral scientists, military strategists, propaganda experts, not guards, not interrogators, not torturers. They designed the lager, every detail, the beds, the food, the schedules, the freedom, the city walks, the books, the music, the newspapers, the radio, the conversations. Nothing was random. Everything was controlled. Even the kindness was planned. Even the freedom was engineered. Even the accidental encounters with civilians were scripted. Even the cafe experiences. Even the shop interactions. Even the walks through parks. The goal was not comfort. The goal was contrast. Because contrast destroys ideology. If you tell a man his enemy is evil and then show him goodness, his belief system collapses. Not violently, silently, internally. One psychologist wrote, "Violence strengthens identity. Comfort dissolves it." They tracked everything. Conversations. Friendships. Language use. Reading habits. Emotional reactions. Behavior changes. Ideological shifts. Religious doubts. Political doubts. Loyalty fractures. Every soldier became data. Not a prisoner. A subject. Some soldiers adapted fast. They integrated. They learned. They changed. They accepted. They softened. They questioned. They evolved. Others resisted. They isolated. They stayed silent. They rejected the city. They refused English. They avoided Americans. They stayed together. They held ideology like a shield. The lager didn't force anyone. That was the genius. No pressure, no threats, no coercion, only exposure, only reality, only freedom. And then the next phase began, not outside the camp, inside their minds. They were given books, not propaganda, not military manuals, not political texts, novels, poetry, philosophy, history, psychology, democracy theory, freedom theory, human rights texts. They were given radio access, music, news, debates, civilian voices, comedy, art, culture. They were allowed to talk with Americans, with immigrants, with Jews, with refugees, with civilians who had lost families, with people who had suffered. One soldier spoke with a Jewish refugee who had escaped Europe. The man told him his story, about camps, about trains, about families, about disappearances. The soldier said nothing. He just listened. And later that night, he cried. Not from guilt, from shock, because it didn't match what he was taught. Another soldier spoke with an American soldier who had lost brothers in the war. They talked about fear, about loss, about missing home, about nightmares. They realized they were the same. Different flags, same pain. That was the real experiment. Not freedom, not comfort, not food. Humanization. The lager was designed to destroy the concept of enemy, because war depends on one idea. They are not like us. Once that collapses, war loses meaning. Inside the camp, divisions grew deeper. Not political, not national. Psychological, identity-based. Some soldiers became something new. Not American, not German, just human. Others became more radical, more loyal, more extreme, more rigid. They called others traitors, weak, corrupted, brainwashed. Fights broke out. Not violent, ideological, verbal, moral, philosophical. The camp leadership watched everything. They didn't stop it. They encouraged discussion, debate, conflict, expression, because belief systems collapse faster in conversation than in isolation. One internal report said, "The most dangerous soldier is not the loyal one. It is the confused one. Confusion creates instability. Instability creates change." And change was the objective. But the lager had a second purpose, a darker one, a long-term one. These soldiers were not meant to stay. They were meant to return, not as prisoners, not as fighters, but as carriers. Carriers of doubt, carriers of stories, carriers of alternative reality, carriers of contradiction, carriers of cognitive conflict. They would go back to Germany, back to families, back to towns, back to villages, back to communities, back to cities. And they would talk, not with propaganda, not with speeches, not with ideology, with experience. They didn't torture us. They didn't beat us. They fed us. They let us walk freely. They treated us like humans. They let us live. And that story was more dangerous than any weapon, because people trust witnesses more than leaders. They trust brothers more than governments. They trust sons more than generals. The lager was building narrative weapons, living narratives, walking contradictions, human propaganda. One officer wrote, "When a man comes home and says, 'The enemy fed me,' the war loses meaning. But there was a risk, a huge one. What if they returned unchanged? What if they stayed loyal? What if they rejected everything? What if the experiment failed?" So they created a final layer, a final control, a final filter. Not everyone would be released. Only those who showed psychological change, only those who showed empathy shifts, only those who showed ideological cracks, only those who showed identity softening. The lager was not about saving everyone, it was about selecting the ones who would carry the message. And that's when the camp became something terrifying, not because of cruelty, but because of precision. They were not prisoners, they were projects. And then something unexpected happened, something dangerous, something human. Some American staff started doubting the project. Psychologists questioned ethics. Officers questioned morality. Scientists questioned manipulation. One doctor wrote, "We are not saving them. We are rewriting them." And that is a different kind of violence. Another officer said, "We accuse them of propaganda, while building the most advanced propaganda system in history." But the project continued, because war does not care about ethics. It cares about outcomes. And the lager kept working, silently, slowly, deeply, not as a prison, not as a camp, but as a machine that reshaped identity. They didn't leave in chains. They didn't leave at night. They didn't leave in secret. They didn't leave broken. They left quietly, individually, calmly, with papers, with permissions, with documents, with instructions. No speeches, no ceremonies, no propaganda, no flags, just transportation, just silence, just a one-way journey. They were told only one thing: you are free to go home. Not to Germany immediately, not to the front, not back to units, but home, to families, to towns, to cities, to villages, to normal life. Some cried, some smiled, some were silent, some were afraid, some were confused, some were grateful, some were suspicious, because freedom after psychological transformation is more frightening than imprisonment. The first men returned to Europe, not as soldiers, as civilians, as sons, as brothers, as husbands, as fathers. They arrived in destroyed cities, bombed streets, ruined buildings, starving people, fear, loss, poverty, trauma, collapse. And they carried a story. Not one story, many stories. They fed us. They let us walk freely. They treated us with dignity. They let us go into their cities. They didn't torture us. They didn't beat us. They didn't break us. At first, no one believed them. They were called liars, traitors, cowards, manipulated, brainwashed. You were corrupted. They poisoned your mind. You betrayed Germany. You forgot who you are. But doubt doesn't need belief. It only needs repetition. They told their families, mothers, fathers, wives, children, friends, neighbors, not speeches, conversations, not propaganda, stories, at tables, in kitchens, in ruined houses, in shelters, in streets, in courtyards, in cellars, in silence. The stories spread, quietly, slowly, organically, not as ideology, as memory. They were kind. They were human. They weren't monsters. And something strange happened. The war narrative cracked. Not politically, psychologically. People started questioning. Not leaders, reality. If they are monsters, why did they feed our sons? If they are evil, why did they let them walk free? If they are demons, why did they treat them like humans? The lager didn't create rebels. It created doubt. And doubt is more dangerous than rebellion, because rebellion fights power. Doubt dissolves belief. Some soldiers refused to return to combat. Some deserted. Some surrendered. Some became passive. Some became silent. Some refused orders. Some questioned commands. Some lost ideological fire. Not because they loved America, but because they no longer believed in the narrative. One officer wrote, "They didn't become pro-American. They became anti-illusion." Families changed. Communities changed. Conversations changed. Language changed. The concept of enemy weakened. Not politically, emotionally. Children heard different stories, not heroic myths, human stories. The enemy gave me bread. The enemy let me walk freely. The enemy treated me like a person. And slowly, war lost its meaning. Not strategically, but psychologically. But not everyone accepted it. Some communities rejected them. Some attacked them. Some silenced them. Some threatened them. Some isolated them. You are dangerous. Your words weaken us. Your stories poison us. Because regimes fear stories more than weapons. Some were arrested, some were interrogated, some were monitored, some disappeared. Because the system understood,